One of the main concerns about Trump getting reelected this November is that he is going to follow through on going after his political opponents. And we have every reason to think that this is going to be the case. He is often talking about revenge and retribution at his rallies. And he's constantly issuing new threats about who he wants to go after or who should be in jail. But there are right-wing commentators that are going to try to tell you that these concerns are overhyped. They're overblown. But these people would be wrong. And that's exactly what David Rode went on to MSNBC to talk about in his new book. Donald Trump tried going after his political opponents when he was president the first time. So let's go ahead and take a look at an introduction to this book, see what it's about, and then go over some specific instances of Trump trying to use the levers of power to go after his perceived enemies. We'll go ahead and take a look.
Our next guest is reporting on the strategies Donald Trump used in the White House, allegedly to turn the country's most powerful law enforcement agencies into personal political weapons. In Where Tyranny Begins, the Justice Department, the FBI, and the War on Democracy, author David Rode exposes how then-President Trump tried to use both agencies to help himself and to punish his enemies. And the two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, NBC News national security editor David Rode joins us now. David, good morning. Good to see you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
This really puts some meat on the bones and does deep reporting on the idea that Donald Trump sort of acted the way a mob boss would act, which is to punish his enemies, use the agencies he had to do that, and to help himself. And you get into some of the specifics about how he did that.
So I can't tell you how many times I see conservatives trying to say that we have nothing to worry about. Donald Trump was president once before, and he didn't try to go after his political opponents then. But as we will see, there is more than a dozen instances of Trump doing just that. Trump is a petty, malignant narcissist. If he thinks that you crossed him in any way, he's likely to come after you. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the examples from this Just Security article that they just released on September 3rd, and it is called The Chronology of a Dozen Times Trump Pushed to Prosecute His Perceived Enemies. And the piece opens up with the cascade of election coverage, commentary, and speculation about how Donald Trump might use the power of the presidency to retaliate against his perceived political enemies has overlooked important context. Trump has done just that while he was president at least a dozen times. Specific instances in which the former president in fact used the Department of Justice and other levers of government power, including by directly, publicly, or privately pressuring officials to target his chosen political adversaries. They also make a quick note that we do not also chronicle President Joe Biden's use of the Justice Department because there is no evidence that he or anyone at the White House ever took similar actions. So when conservatives come at you and try to tell you that Joe Biden was secretly, pushing Alvin Bragg to prosecute Trump in New York, they're just wrong. There has never been any evidence to prove or to show that Joe Biden has been involved in any such behavior. So let's go ahead and look through these 12 different examples. I highly recommend that you go read the entire article so you can get the details on these. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to read the titles of these different instances, and then hopefully you can follow up by going to read the article yourself. So starting with number 1, it says, Trump asks then Attorney General Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself to investigate and prosecute Hillary Clinton. Now, this is something that Donald Trump asked Jeff Sessions to do on multiple occasions. So there's no reason to believe that he wouldn't engage in there's no reason not to believe that he wouldn't engage in similar behavior if he were to become president again. Number 2, Trump publicly scolds the Justice Department for not investigating Clinton. Now, some might say, oh, well, he was just tweeting, yada, yada. No. Everybody understands the power of the bully pulpit. The president is the most powerful figure in the world, and what he says matters, and people take his threats or his direction seriously. So that is no excuse for Trump to be acting this way. Number 3, Sessions directs U.S. Attorney for Utah, John W. Huber, to investigate Hillary Clinton and the Uranium 1 conspiracy. And this is why I continue to say that conspiracy theories are dangerous, especially when they're seeping into official work at the FBI or the DOJ. We are expending resources that shouldn't be expended because these conspiracy theories have no basis in fact. That is why these conspiracy theories can be dangerous. Number 4, the criminal investigation of the Clinton Foundation. Trump also directed his people to go investigate the Clinton Foundation. Number 5, criminal investigation and the near prosecution of former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Now, this Andrew McCabe case was terrible. Donald Trump pressured him to be fired just 26 hours before his pension would kick in. And so he got fired and he lost his pension. Luckily, he was able to sue the department and got his pension back, including back pay. But nevertheless, this is something that Trump played a role in. Number 6, Trump demands investigation into his debunked Spygate conspiracy theory. Just another instance of Trump concocting conspiracy theories based on non-facts and then telling his people to go look for those facts. It is absolutely insane behavior. Number 7, Trump privately told White House counsel he wanted to order the Justice Department to prosecute James Comey and Hillary Clinton. Again, if Trump thinks you crossed him, expect him to come after you. Number 8, Trump publicly urges Sessions to investigate a long list of perceived political enemies. He wanted the Justice Department, through Sessions, to investigate, including James Comey, Robert Mueller, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, Christopher Steele, and the Clinton Foundation. Unbecoming behavior from a sitting president. Number 9, the Durham investigation, directed at law enforcement and intelligence officials, as well as Hillary Clinton. The Durham probe was absolutely insane. I highly recommend you at least read this one because the details are quite stunning. Number 10, Trump urges Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to open a criminal investigation of Joe Biden. And we all know how that ended up, don't we? Donald Trump was impeached over this. In no world is it okay for our president to be asking other nation presidents to look into their political opponents. This was when Joe Biden was coming on the scene and going to be running for president. And Trump tried to get dirt on Biden in extra legal ways by asking Zelensky to do so. Absolutely insane stuff. Number 11, criminal investigations of Comey. That was in at least August 2019, January 2020, through January 2021. And the last one, number 12, Trump threatens to prosecute Secretary of State Brad Raffensberger if he doesn't overturn his election defeat in Georgia. And we all saw how grotesque that whole situation was. In no way is it okay for Donald Trump to call up and try to pressure Brad Raffensberger to find him 11,780 votes. That is just not okay. That's an absurd abuse of power. And I believe that Trump should definitely not be reelected based on that incident alone. So you might be asking, we constantly hear that Trump is going to go after his political opponents and yada, yada, yada. Why are you making such a big deal about it now? I think the most important thing that we need to keep in mind as we move towards the November election is that the Supreme Court handed down an insane immunity ruling, which would give Donald Trump carte blanche to go wreak havoc in all of the agencies, because most of the things that we just read off here from the just security list, they would be beyond reproach. You couldn't even investigate most of these conversations because they are deemed official acts of the president, and therefore they are completely immune. That is why this stuff is important. So let's go ahead and listen to a little bit more about how this immunity ruling could impact a second Trump term.
The Supreme Court came through with this immunity ruling, which obviously impacts everything you write about in this book. So if Donald Trump is reelected, how will that change this dynamic?
It dramatically changes it. Former Justice Department officials, major characters in this book, said that they were very surprised by the ruling. Current Justice Department officials were surprised as well. It's never existed before in American history, but the Supreme Court says that all conversations between the president and the attorney general are absolutely immune from criminal prosecution. So the president, Donald Trump, can call his attorney general and say, I want you to investigate Mark Zuckerberg and prosecute him. He can probably start that process, and he could, possibly even jail Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg would appeal to the Supreme Court, and they would have to decide. It's an extraordinary thing, though, and it's been a check on presidents since Nixon that you don't use the Justice Department to attack your political enemies. If you do, you'll pay a political price. The Supreme Court will never let you get away with it. That's not clear now.
And undoubtedly, Donald Trump would put in a lackey as attorney general and get whatever he wants out of that relationship.
Yes, one of the plans is to put in acting officials, an acting attorney general, and then you get around Senate confirmation.
I think every single person in America should be concerned, especially as it pertains to this immunity ruling. We should all keep in mind that Donald Trump has already proved to the American people that he is willing to go after his perceived enemies or his political opponents. And we should really ask ourselves, is that the type of president that we want to elect? Are these the type of norms that we want trampled all over? It's really important to remember that if Trump is reelected, one of the main plans in Project 2025 is that they're going to fire tens of thousands of federal employees and replace them with Trump acolytes. That means that there will be no checks on Trump's power. There will be nobody there to push back on his insane ideas. Instead, they will either look the other way or they'll go along with it. This is just another way we can consider Trump an authoritarian. These are common tactics we see from authoritarian leaders. And David Rhodes' book actually was based on a very succinct quote about authoritarians. Let's go ahead and listen to that really quick.
Sure. It's a quote from John Locke, who 15 years ago, and the quote is, "Where law ends, tyranny begins," and that's a reference to the use by different authoritarian leaders throughout history. Where they start seizing power is they use the courts and law enforcement agencies to sort of punish their enemies, their political rivals, and protect their friends. And I found that Trump did try to do that in his first term, and I think that would continue in a second term. Again, there are many public servants who stood up to Trump. They paid a heavy price for that. People thought that many of these career folks in the DOJ and FBI, that the presidency would change Trump. Instead, Donald Trump changed the presidency.
Instead, Donald Trump changed the presidency. I think that is a great way to summarize this whole thing. When Donald Trump was elected, we thought he was going to be bad, but I don't think anybody anticipated just how bad he would be. He showed no respect for our institutions. In fact, he undermined them every chance he got. If he perceived that an institution was somehow against him, he did everything he could to discredit it. He broke a whole bunch of norms. He went after his opponents. These are the things we should be thinking about before we go vote in November. Our system has worked pretty well up until Donald Trump, and I think it is really accurate to say that Donald Trump did change the presidency. And so we need to be electing people who aren't going to be abusing this power like Trump would. So that's going to do it for me on this one, folks. If you got anything out of this video, if you could remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe, maybe share it with a friend or two, I'd very much appreciate that. If you think I got something wrong, or if you disagree with me about something, feel free to drop a comment below. And if you want to learn about Trump's connections to Project 2025, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. And I will see you guys on the next one.